Okay, wonderful. So yeah, first of all, I have to apologize. I caught a cold over the weekend, so I'm still coughing a bit. So I apologize if I cough a bit during my presentation, but I really wanted to be here today. So yes, I will try not to cough too much. I will try to uh, not to talk too much because I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. But anyway, great. So good to see you all today. So that's the 10th session of this Leveraging the Value Creation of Tacit Knowledge course. And today I would like to share with you some of the, a methodology that I've used doing some consulting that I learned from a French professor, Professor Jean-Louis Hermine, who is my mentor, who was my mentor, but who's still active in the field of KM. So I got a chance to develop these knowledge books under, working with him and later on my own. And we organize also workshops around this methodology. So the challenge today was really for me to give you a quick overview in 1 hour. That's really was a challenge, but hopefully I will be able to do that and give you a sense of what the knowledge book is and how to build it and what's the value of it when it comes to capturing and structuring tacit knowledge. So the agenda for today. So I will first give you a bit of background related to this method. We'll talk about the elicitation process, so the knowledge elicitation process overall. We'll talk about the models that are used by the MASK method, and I will explain what MASK is all about, and of course, what these models are and how they can be used to capture tacit knowledge. And then we will have some case studies. I will share some knowledge books I've developed, but also we'll have a guest today who will share also his experience with developing knowledge books. So let's get started. So one of the main purpose of this knowledge book is to help to elicit expert tacit critical knowledge. So here as you could see, I emphasize on tacit and critical knowledge, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Well, by now you should be familiar with what tacit is all about, but the critical part maybe less, and I will further explain through the presentation. So if we look at knowledge transfer, and particularly tacit knowledge transfer, so we know that, and this was also presented in previous sessions, that a face-to-face or a direct transfer is probably the most efficient way to transfer this tacit knowledge when people have the opportunity to spend time together, to work together, to observe each other, and so on. But we also know and we also realize that's not always possible to have this face-to-face interaction. So instead of having a direct knowledge transfer, we have to go through an indirect transfer. This is where, here we go. So we have to go through an indirect knowledge transfer where we're going to somehow codify, elicit, or capitalize this knowledge that we have gained from the knowledge holder, from the expert, structure it there are different ways to structure it. Today we'll talk about structuring with model using the MASK method, but it could be for a transcript or for video recording or whatever. And then later on, of course, once it has been codified, it's much easier to share it, to transfer it to a large scale. And then later on, so we hope that this knowledge book or whatever has been captured will be somehow absorbed and also appropriated or internalized by the receiver, who will be able to develop his or her own tacit knowledge based on what they were able to learn from these materials. So they are not, I mean, I was looking for strong evidence on this, but I could not find really some study, scientific study about this. But I've read through some books that in direct transfer, we could estimate that at best, we could transfer 70% of, I mean, someone's knowledge, if this person, of course, is fully willing and open to share it, and if enough time is dedicated for this to be happening. Now, if you take the indirect transfer, it is estimated in average that's around 30% of what can be captured. So we can see there is a big difference between the two channels of being direct or indirect. But the advantage with also with the mask technique is that if you have access to the expert, and in addition you have some codified resources to support what the expert know, then for sure you have the best case scenario. So today we'll talk about the indirect transfer, so how to capture, structure this tacit knowledge so it can be later on reused by whoever might want to learn about this, or for training or development purpose. Now, so the first step I mentioned, we are talking about critical knowledge. We know we cannot capture all knowledge, and that's not the objective of an organization. We want to focus on what's most important. So we have what is called, usually the first step is to do some knowledge mapping and identify, so this is, for instance, for an oil and gas company, identify what are the main knowledge domains and subdomains, not trying to go into much detail, but maybe 3 or 4 levels to get an overview of, okay, what do we know, right, in our organization? What are the main knowledge domains? And also, who are the experts, the people in the yellow box here, are whoever is identified as being the expert in a particular level. So again, you don't want to go into much detail, otherwise you might have to deal with too many experts, but at a high level, you might be able to identify I would say 10 to 20 experts that you can work with to start. Now, the idea is to identify in this knowledge domain what is the critical knowledge. So that's the knowledge which is at risk, so at risk of being lost or forgotten, or I mean, if, for instance, you only have one expert who possesses a particular knowledge and this expert leaves the organization, or retired, or run into an accident, this knowledge might be lost. And of course, we want to avoid this. But not only knowledge which is at risk, but also knowledge which has value to the organization, right? I mean, if someone knows about something, but no one care any longer about such kind of knowledge, or is obsolete or whatever, then it's not of value. So it needs to be also at value to the organization. So in fact, there are multiple versions of mask that address different things. What we're going to focus on today is mask 1, and I will explain it in detail. But mask 2 is another technique that is used to identify this critical knowledge. And what mask 2 helps to do upfront is to identify what is this critical knowledge. So it's defined by knowledge which is scarce or rare, so which is not everyone possesses, right? Which is useful to the organization, so which has value, but also which is somehow difficult to handle, so difficult to acquire, also difficult to operate and to use. So that's how criticality is assessed using the mask 2 method. We don't have time today, unfortunately, to go over any detail, but just giving you a sense of how we identify what knowledge is critical based on these 4 dimensions. And for each dimension, we interview the expert. There are sub-dimensions. I'm going to show them to you in the next slide. And then we are able to get a sense if this knowledge domain is critical or not. So at the end, we come up with some radar graph like this for a particular knowledge domain to identify a bit what are different level of criticality based on these 20 criteria. So we have identified the different knowledge domains. We have identified their criticality. We have identified who the expert who own this knowledge are. And now finally, so we're going to get into talking to the expert to elicit, to capture their knowledge, right? So knowledge that the expert possesses, and knowledge, not only that the expert possess, but also which has value to the organization, right? So we have this sweet spot here where we know that this knowledge is strategic to the organization. We know that it's critical. So that's where we should start to put our efforts on when it comes to capture this critical and tacit knowledge. Okay, so what do we do with that? So now that we know who we need to interview and what about, so ultimate goal is to create a knowledge book. So a knowledge book is not a traditional book, even so it's called a book. It's much more a digital book, and I will show you one at the end of the session, which is more or less an organized collection of various knowledge assets related to a specific domain. And that will allow, once again, when it has been captured, first to preserve this knowledge, but then to allow others to learn from it. So it's the output of running this mask method that I'm going to explain to you in a moment. The main objective of creating this knowledge book, so like I said, is to preserve the knowledge that some experts possess. And also to be able to identify, how did we come to acquire or to use or to have developed such kind of knowledge? So we're going to see the historical evolution that led to do the things we do them now is also very important to capture. And the knowledge book will help to retrace and capture such kind of evolution. And of course, when it has been captured, the purpose is to be reused, right? And instead of always reinventing the wheel, and potentially to be leveraged to new knowledge, so to innovation. It's also a way to provide a structured way to access to this knowledge. We're going to see that there are lots of limitations to capture knowledge and just write it into a report. So the knowledge book will help to structure this knowledge in a way that it's easy to navigate and to learn from. And as I said, the ultimate goal is to also for people to learn from it and for this knowledge to be transferred to others. And this can be the raw material, also the source for dialogue and exchange among technicians or people working in this field. So this could be an asset, for instance, for a community of practice that could be used to further discuss, evolve, explore new avenues and new technology or new approach. Now, let's talk a bit about the elicitation process. So like I said, we identify the knowledge domains, we identify their criticality, then we're going to elicit the critical knowledge from the experts. That's what we're going to focus on. We create the digital book, and then this book is used for training. So this is the flow of the MASC-1 technique. So how does it work? So once we have identified the critical knowledge that needs to be captured from an expert, so we have a meeting with this expert, and where we help to really define the scope of this knowledge book. So by defining more or less the title of the knowledge book, we already define what will be the content of this knowledge book for this expert. Then we will go through a set of interviews, and I will explain how these interviews are done, but they are usually conducted by someone who's novice in the field, like myself. So I mean, I've done a lot of different knowledge book on topics that I had no idea about. Well, I have an engineering background, so sometimes it helps me a bit to understand what's behind some of these advanced technology or method or whatever. But having a novice who asks a question is also a good way to make sure that, because when experts talk in between them, they make a lot of assumptions and things like this. Here we want to make sure we capture everything and the why behind everything. So having someone who's not much an expert or novice in the field might help to ask maybe some candid questions that might help also to get at the core of the relationship between all these different knowledge components. So an interview usually with an expert lasts, I would say, 1 week. It might not be 1 full week, but usually that's the time we spend with the expert, and we will see how this time is spent. Then, so we develop this model that I'm going to talk to you about. We collect also any documents and additional information that will be of value. Then later on, we create a first version of a prototype, if you want, of the knowledge book that we gonna potentially debrief with the expert and potentially other members. And then later on, once the knowledge book is almost finalized, we get the content also validated by peers, meaning people, other experts in the field or people who are involved in this field to also get their point of view. We rarely, when we conduct the interview, I mean, with the mask technique, we only work with one expert at a time. When you bring two experts together in a meeting, usually they always have different opinions on different things, and they start engaging into discussion, and it's a never-ending process. So we'll rather do it one at a time. If there is really some discrepancies, or if there is really things they don't agree, then we can try to facilitate a meeting so they come up with a consensus. But the idea is to work with one expert at a time, capture his or her expertise, and then later on get some peer reviewing for final validation or for additional parts that may not have been originally captured. And then before the release of this knowledge book, so we usually, it contains some very sensitive and valuable information. So we often need an approval from the top management to release it, or to define who might have access to this knowledge, because it's usually of high value. So during this interview session, so we co-create knowledge models with experts, and I'm going to explain to you what it means and how it's done. So we have to go through interview, and if you remember the presentation from Dr. Peter a few weeks back, we are, of course, asking some information question where the expert will clearly identify what they do and how they do it. But we also look for questions that are more discovery type of question, to let the expert think and reflect on why they do it and how they do it, right? I mean, last week, Moria mentioned about different case studies about for instance, the suit, the company that was making suits with different fabrics, and they had an expert. So again, having the expert think about how he or she makes these decisions. And so this kind of discovery question are quite useful. So at the beginning, we really brief the expert that, we are really looking to capture some knowledge which is unique to them, right? We don't want some knowledge that everyone possesses, but things that are really unique to them and which has potentially not yet been documented, right? So that's a bit the idea behind going through this work. And then we ask them some questions. So I just came up with a list of questions that are somehow important. It's not all of them, but just some time to get started. So here is the first question. What challenges do your peers frequently seek your expertise for, which seems difficult to others? So why do people come to you? In which situation, in which cases will they come to you to ask for help, right? For instance, one question we ask is, okay, why will your team member call you while you are in vacation, for instance, for what kind of problems that they cannot solve on their own while you are away, and will require them to still give you a call to get an answer, right? So these are the type of questions where you can identify already that this knowledge might be unique to this expert, because he or she might be the only one who might be able to solve it. So in terms of system, process, technologies, in which areas do you possess unparalleled knowledge? So again, uniqueness. Could you discuss any pivotal project you have been a part of or you are currently involved in that have provided you with distinctive insight or experience potentially valuable for future endeavors? So we are looking for some things that are unusual, right? Project things that don't happen very often, and make sure that, I mean, an expert usually have been through lots of situations, lots of cases. So that's a kind of information valuable to capture. Can you elaborate on the key professional relationship and networks you've cultivated that significantly benefit the organization and are exclusive to your role? Again, the social network of an expert internally and externally to the organization is also very important to identify and to capture. So if one day this expert leave, we have trace of who were potentially some of the key people that the expert was interacting with to be able to get his or her, I mean, key information. So I listed like this. I'm not going to go over all of them. Let's say number 5 still. Are there any critical documents or piece of information that you are adept of locating, which other may have neglected or forgotten or might not be aware of? And experts always have tons of documents on their own laptop or whatever that maybe others might not have access to, that have not been shared through other systems. Yeah, number 8. What are some non-obvious signs or early indicators in your field that you should pay attention to, which others might typically overlook? So what are some of the triggers or the things you always try to check? Because we know that experts usually need much less information than novice, right? An expert with just few key information might be able to make a diagnosis of a problem or what's wrong or whatever, where a novice might want to collect much more information, but at the end might be lost into this. So these are the kind of information also that might be useful to capture. So anyway, I will share the slide. So you have, these are just some example of questions that helps to identify what is the expert unique critical knowledge. Now, the expert, of course, has developed some tools, usually of any kind, right? So this can be an Excel macro. This could be I mean, whatever kind of little program or even physical tools to help them do some of these things. So we need to identify what are some of these expert professional repertoire tools, methodologies that they are using, some example of past case studies that work and what didn't work so well, some personal network, we mentioned about this too. Also some insight and acumen, right? How they make decisions or quick decision. Some special gestures that they have developed in some field to do things in a particular way, right? So this might be valuable to capture. Of course, some know-how and some historical background or evolution or decisions that were made. So I will say what's on the right side, and again, these are just some examples, are more tacit type of knowledge. So one on the left are much more explicit. So we need to capture both for sure. But since the session here is more about tacit knowledge, that's probably what we will focus more on. Now, let's get to the 6 mask model. I'm not checking the chat, but hopefully, okay, no, so far no question. Great. So MASK, what does MASK stand for? So MASK stands for Method for Analyzing and Structuring Knowledge. And like I said, there are 4 versions of MASK. This is MASK 1. I mentioned about MASK 2, which is about more defining the critical knowledge in your institution strategically. And there is a MASK 3 and 4. One is about innovation management, the link, and one is about, I believe, communities of practice. So yeah, there is much more to explore, but today we focus on MASK 1. So as I mentioned, it was developed originally by Professor Jean-Louis Hermine, who was working at the French Center for Atomic Energy. I know some of you know him or have worked with him. He's, I will say, a KM guru in France. And then this method was also used and developed in some schools, but also at the Club de Gestion des Connaissances, which is a French KM club. So this method has been used intensively in a lot of different fields. I would say it works very well with fields that are a bit technical per se, or engineering companies or whatever, because as you will see, it's structured around model. But as I will show you also at the end, a particular knowledge book, it can be applied also to capture some more soft kind of skill or management skills and so on. So Dan, a few weeks back, presented these great visuals about what are the common methods for extracting tacit knowledge. So here we are, I added model co-creation that was not originally part of the graph. And that's more or less the technique we're going to use, interviews, reflective questions, and critical incident method to trigger and to extract tacit knowledge from the expert. Now, lots of knowledge capturing method use collect or capture the knowledge of the expert through a transcript. So they conduct an interview and then later on they summarize what the expert said. So this can be a document, this can be a procedure, this can be whatever. This kind of approach is good, but it has its limitation. First of all, the more you collect information, the more it's going to be difficult to for someone to go through it or to read it all. When you're presented with a 500-page report in front of you and say, okay, this is what you have to learn, usually that's not quite exciting to go through this, and you might want to take shortcut. And we know that the accumulation of information is not knowledge. So it's not because you have, again, 100 books about civil engineering that you are a civil engineer. So there need to be a much more understanding about the relationship between this information and how they can be acted upon. So usually these transcripts are captured based on a single point of view. So for instance, this is collected for a particular report in a particular domain for marketing purpose or for engineering purpose. And so the questions that are asked are also biased towards this particular point of view. And this does not give a general overview of the domain. And again, the structure and the navigation of this transcript usually are quite difficult. I mean, you can use hyperlinks between different sections, but that's still not very user-friendly to navigate or difficult to see the relationship that happens between different pieces of knowledge or piece of interviews that you have collected over time. Now, what the mask technique use is a modeling approach. So modeling is the idea behind it is the use of graphical language to capture and to structure this tacit knowledge. We all know that a drawing is always, we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we can say a drawing is worth 1,000 words, but only if it's well done and if it makes sense. So we need to keep this in mind. A graphical model also is a good tool and easier tool also to communicate. And that's why very often, I mean, we prototype ideas because having a physical representation to it makes it easier for engaging in discussion or getting feedback or whatever. But the model also must be intuitive, so easy to create, first of all, and also easy for anyone to read it, even though they are not expert in knowledge engineering or in knowledge management. So, but a model, you need to make sure that one model cannot reflect all the different views of this particular knowledge. So we might need to have multiple perspectives from the same knowledge. So we might need to use more than one model, right? More than one drawing. And the model should not be just a simple sketch too, meaning that, well, there needs to be some a bit of theory and rationale behind it. So that's why MASK is using knowledge model. So when I deliver the full workshop in 2 or 3 days, we talk about the route, I mean, what are the ground foundation of these models, but today we don't have time for it. Just know that, and I will share some reference for you to learn more about it if you are interested into it. But the 6 models I'm going to present to you are based on semiotic approach, which is semiotic is a science of sign and how signs somehow reflect knowledge, and also systemic approach knowledge. So by combining these two views of knowledge, they were able to develop the MASK method. So the MASK method is composed of 6 point of views, which are represented in 6 models. So I'm going to explain to you. So he's looking at knowledge through a particular prism that break down this knowledge in 6 different point of view or in 6 model representation. So let me explain to you what they are through a very simple example. So there is a book in France which is well known, a cooking book, which is called La Cuisine de Maguelone. And Maguelone Toussaint is a well-known chef, and she wrote a book, very, very thick book, as you can see. It says, My Method, My Recipes, and My Secrets. So in this book, she provides lots of details about how she cooks things, how she prepares them, what are the reasons behind preparing them that way, and so on. So we extracted some of this wisdom from Maguelone to demonstrate a bit how such kind of knowledge, for instance, could be articulated. So 6 model. Let's start by the concept model. The concept model is a model that helps to structure or organize things, and so organize concept. And you will see when an expert explains things, they will explain things for a particular machine, for a particular process, for a particular problem, or whatever. So it's always important to understand how does this particular thing fit into the overall picture. And that's why we use this concept model, which is more or less a taxonomy of whatever we are looking into. So let me show you an example with a recipe book. So let's say if we talk about pastries. So pastries, we have pie pastries, baker's dough, and cake pastries. So there are 3 main families. Each family, pie pastry, for instance, there are short pastry, shortcut pastry, flake pastry, and so on. If you look at short crust pastry, you have sweet and unsweetened. And then really at the bottom of the taxonomy here, you have a pastry cream tart, which is a specific type of this shortcut pastry. So we work with the experts on different things that they are talking about, always to try to organize the concept that they are talking about, so we get an overview of what they are getting into. Just a question, what's the difference of a knowledge book and a knowledge map? Knowledge map helps to map the knowledge that you have in your organization. A knowledge book helps to capture the knowledge of a particular expert and to structure it. And I'm going to show you. And so what I'm presenting here are some of the models that helps to structure this knowledge. So the concept model, structure thing as a taxonomy. Here, for instance, I extracted something from a quick interview I had done with an expert mechanical engineer, looking at what are the main cause of pump failures, right? So it can come from the seal, or it can come from the bearing part. And then from the seal, it might be down to natural wearing, lack of buffer filling, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, this can be jargon to you, and it's also jargon to me. It just show, for instance, when we talk about something, we try to analyze it through this concept representation to understand what are the different option possibilities and how they relate with each other. The second model we use is the activity model. So usually we start by the activity model because it helps to show a sequence of activities. For instance, what does the expert do? And how does he or she does that, in what sequences? So we use such kind of activity model representation. So each activity, for each activity, so there is an input and an output, right? There is an actor who's performing, or actors, a group of actors that are performing the activity. So we identify them. What kind of resources are required to perform this activity? And of course, very importantly, what kind of knowledge is required? What kind of know-how is required to perform this task, and what kind of behavioral skills is used to do that. So knowledge is much more generic. We need knowledge about, let's say if you're a carpenter, you need knowledge about woods and wood structure or whatever. Know-how is how to curve, for instance, the wood. So that's special skills. And behavioral skills are more about how to behave with people, or how to gain empathy, or you need to have empathy to do this task, or you need to have good communication skills, or whatever. So we analyze with the expert at first at a very high level what are the different steps of activity he or she does perform. For each activity, we identify at a high level what they are doing, and then we break down each activity in sub-activities and then in sub-activities and so on to identify, again, through the process, what are the different steps required, what kind of knowledge is required for every step, what kind of resource, and so on. So if we go back to our bakery example, so the main steps are to prepare the dough, to let the dough rest, to shape the pastry, and then to cook the pastry, right? And for each of them, you have different skills and knowledge that are required. I just want you to keep in mind here, we have a link to a task, how to make the bread dough. So we're going to see that this activity will be breakdown later on into tasks that explain in much more detail the sub-steps to be able to do that. And here also, cooking the pastry, we have a link to what we call a phenomenon model, which helps to understand what's behind it, how the cooking is happening, or what does the cooking phenomenon does to the dough to make it crusty or not. Third model is a task model. And again, I'm going fast. I don't expect you to be expert in math, just to give you an overview. So the task is more related to the skills, the know-how of the expert. So if we take the example, usually we'll read it from left to right. So I told you there is a link to this task, make a bread dough. So how do you make a bread dough? So first you put the flour in a big bowl. Then you put aside 200 grams of the flour, and we're going to see why later on. Then later on, you make a well in the flour. You add slightly salted wet water in this little well that you have done in your flour. And then you dissolve the baker's yeast. Then you knead the flour, and then you flour your hands frequently in the flour that you put aside. You can see over here, you put aside your flour, and then later on, you use it to put on your hands. So later on, when you knead the flour, the dough doesn't stick to your finger. And so on, like this, we can go and detail all the activity like this. So that's a task activity. And it is, of course, connected to some of the activities we've seen before. Everything will be connected to everything. I'm showing you the model separately, but they all link with each other. And then the last one is the phenomena model. So the phenomena model, what more or less is used to describe a phenomenon, which is physical or not, and that somehow leads to a transformation. So it could be a physical transformation or human transformation. Here, if we look at the shortcut pastry, so the chef told us that the kneading the dough makes a particle of flour, which are coated in fat, sufficiently impermeable to the steam released by the cooking process. So in trying to escape, the steam exerts a pressure on the dough, which expands slightly, just enough to stay thin and crusty. So that's what the magic that is happening in the oven. And again, this can be represented by what we call a phenomena model. So what does trigger this phenomena? So that's the baking in this case. So what happens? So the particle coated in fat somehow, based on the steam in the oven, the flow of steam on the oven, which somehow touch the coated fat, makes the pastry expand. And then at the end, this leads to a thin and crusty paste. And what are factors influence this process? So the type of flour that you use, the oven temperature, and so on. So as you can see, this is a kind of a model that helps to understand a bit what happens behind something, right? Let's say we could create one about changing behavior of people. What is the trigger that will help them to change? What kind of change will be happening, and how we would like them to be at the end? Sorry for going fast, but again, it's just to give you a sense. Here is an example of a again, a problem, but let me skip it because we are running a bit out of time. So hopefully you gain a bit of understanding of what I'm trying to explain. So I'm going to give you a quick assignment. So how many of you have joined today? Where is the list? 39. Great. So what I'm going to ask you to do, so we're going to access the Miro board, and I'm going to share the link with you in a second. So what you're going to do on this Miro board. So on the Miro board, each team will find the transcript of an interview that we did with an expert in shoemaking. And what I would like you to do is to identify in this particular interview transcript what part could be modelized as an activity. So I don't want you to modelize it, but which part could be used to modelize an activity. So the process that this shoemaker is using, what task, what kind of know-how is he using to build his shoes, what kind of concept are they using? So for instance, different type of shoes or different type of raw material, and what kind of phenomena is he talking about in this description? So when you access to Miro, you will see the transcript. So run through it rapidly. And what I want you to do is to highlight. So highlight in green whatever part you believe is more related to the phenomena. Highlight in pink whatever you think is more related to the task, and so on and so on. Okay? So I'm going to break you down in teams. Let me stop sharing first. You have the link to the in the chat box, I guess. Let me just launch the team. So there are 40 of you. Let me create 8 teams. Where are my breakout rooms? Okay, create 8 break room, and I give you 10 minutes to do that. Let me see. Create options. Breakup room close automatically in 10 minutes. Okay, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but good luck. I trust you can do it. Let me just validate this. Okay. Okay, have fun. Okay, welcome back. So I know it was very short. I mean, the goal is not for you really to solve it all, because I know you will have been a bit challenging, but just to get a sense a bit of what it takes to identify and extract from, I mean, usually the interview is face-to-face, is not through a transcript, but you get a sense a bit on how you need to analyze what is said to you and think about, okay, how I'm going to be able to model what has been shared with me, and how you model it on the board with the expert, and how the expert say, oh, yes, but I forgot this, I forgot that. So the co-creation of this model with the expert during the time of the interview is not that we do the model afterwards. We co-create the model during the interview session with the model. So you will see on the Miro board, if you scroll down, I added under all the teams the solution. So I'm not going to spend time on it now because we don't have time, but you can find the solutions just on the Miro board underneath the completely at the bottom of the assignment. There are two other models that I didn't have time to talk about that I will very, very rapidly skim through: the history and evolution model. The history somehow helps to capture how we evolve, how the knowledge has evolved over time, and what is the relationship between this evolution. Let me just show you an example. If I talk about car technology, so we have different class. So we have, for instance, how the car technology evolved, how globalization somehow may have impacted it, how the environmental regulation also may have impacted it. So we try to create as many classes, so as many separate kind of conditions or contexts that may have an impact on what we are trying to do. So here, if it was about the evolution of car, we could say that there are different influence and we capture them that way. And the last one is the evolution model, which is also related to the history model. Is that, okay, moving from generation 1 to generation 2, moving from oil engine cars to electric cars, what were the driver of the evolution, and then what were the pros and cons. So we usually have a table like this that shows that, for instance, well, for hybrid cars, these are the pros, these were the cons, these are the pros, these were the cons, and so on. So we are able to trace back why we are doing things the way we do them now, what was good about the other way we were doing them before, what was not so good, because sometimes, because of new regulation or whatever, we might have to change our process or how we do things, and going and knowing what was done maybe 20 years ago and how it was done can be a very source of value. Okay, so through this 6 model, usually we can capture, organize, and structure the main aspect of the expert knowledge. All these models, as I mentioned, are connected with each other, so they are not separate, but they all connect with each other. You can navigate them by entering through different models, and there are documents attached to them. Remember, I told you the experts have documents, they have tools, they have repositories, they have connections. So all these connection documents or whatever are connected to this model too. So if for doing a particular task, you need to check with someone what needs to be done, or you need to check someone from outside what are the current trends or whatever, then you have also this link and everything that comes with it. So you have the mask model, you have all the document attached to it, and you have the navigation and everything that goes around it. Now, case studies. So again, I'm going to have to go hyper quick here, but when we create the knowledge book, when we co-create the knowledge book with the expert, usually we do it on the board. And then in the evening, I work and somehow convert this this model that we co-created in PowerPoint just to create a prototype, okay, and having hyperlinks between these different models as an as a first prototype. And then later on, once it went through validation or whatever, so we release a knowledge book. So usually it's a website. Usually it's a website that can be a wiki. So it means that I'm gonna have to stop sharing. Sorry, just 1 second. That can be a wiki, so people can comment on this knowledge, or people can get this knowledge to evolve. And here is, for instance, usually we cannot share the knowledge book with anyone because we signed some NDA, but for this one, the organization kind of agreed. So a knowledge book for this one was represented that way. You have the expert at the center. So the expert somehow is proud of his or her knowledge books. And usually if you click on the center, you have a brief biography of who this person was. So the experts are happy and proud to be part of it. And then you have, in this case, for instance, we created a mind map that helps to show all the different documents or content which are on this knowledge book. But otherwise, you can navigate through this knowledge book through different entry points. And again, depending on the topic, this may vary. We have, for instance, some interviews, some videos of the experts. So there is some multimedia content attached to it too. And again, so you navigate through the different models. They are all linked with each other, and it helps you to get an overview. So you have different ways to navigate them. Again, I don't have much time to go through all of this, but this one was, and like I said, usually that's quite technical type of knowledge book, but this one was about one of the vice president of an oil and gas company who had implemented total quality management in his organization, a large-scale organization, and he was sharing all his know-how on how to make it happen, on how to engage people, on what to do. So there is also, we went rapidly, but you have an history. Where is this one? You have an historical diagram that shows I mean, what happened in this company, what were the different phases, how they were involved by different regulation or standard and things like this. You can also, of course, also search by keyword. But that's what at the end the knowledge book might look like. Let me just stop sharing, and I have 2 more things to do. I know we are very short on time, and I'm trying to, I knew it would be a bit of a challenge. We are already over time. So now we are lucky among us. We have Jonathan. Jonathan has some experience in using knowledge books. And so Jonathan, are you here with us?
I'm always here, Vincent. Always
here. Okay. So the
so,
floor is yours.
So thank you so much. So I just want to say I've been using the Mask Method, the knowledge books, for almost 15 years. So part of a food manufacturing organization, so very technical, food chemists, engineers, that kind of thing. And I think over the years we've developed something like 20, 25 knowledge books, that kind of scale of magnitude. And as you look across all of these knowledge books, you see the different models that Vincent's been talking about in different parts of the knowledge books. Each knowledge book is very, very different, and it represents the unique knowledge of the subject matter expert. So sometimes you see a lot of phenomena models, sometimes a lot of activity models. It depends on the subject, on the focus area. What we found really useful is that these are particular ways of capturing the person's view of their own knowledge, the person's conception. So I love what you said at the beginning about using someone who's not a subject matter expert to facilitate elicitation. And we love the idea of someone co-owning these knowledge books, enabling them to be developed, to be built upon. So we don't create websites, we create PowerPoint objects. All of our knowledge books are PowerPoint. Some of them are 20 or 30 slides, some of them are 100, 200 slides, some of them are quite substantial. And we must make sure that those stay as living documents, so they are kept as PowerPoint objects, and they are owned by a group of other subject matter experts, and they can be built upon. And we do sometimes refresh those knowledge books. I don't know what else you wanted me to say, Vincent. I'm just noticing the time.
So is it so you find them to be useful also to train new engineers or new
yes.
Subject matter experts? So they are used for training too?
They are the first point of entry for people who are new to a technical area. We use the knowledge books mostly as a way of upskilling new engineers, new food scientists, and also for people who are transferring from one food technology to another. to get some insights on the specific personal tacit knowledge of somebody who is considered to be a long-term expert. And we've developed most of them as a result of people retiring. In a few cases, we've developed them because we want to augment existing knowledge. We just want to capitalize and build on existing knowledge, not because someone is leaving specifically.
Okay.
But they're
Well,
incredibly powerful.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your testimonial. I didn't pay anything to Jonathan for saying that, just to let you know.
Unfortunately.
there is no bribe here, but I'm glad that we have some real testimonial on what the tool can do. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing. And my last slide, and I know we're already over time, come from a great philosopher who says, tap into the wisdom of the experience. Their insights are like lighthouses guiding ships through the uncharted waters of knowledge. So that's a great philosopher named ChatGPT that came up with this, but I found it to be quite relevant to what we share and inspirational. So I mentioned a lot the work of Jean-Louis Hermine. So there are 2 books that summarize, or not summarize, but give in much more detail some explanation about this method. So again, you would get the reference through the slide. Sorry for having to go so fast. There was so much material. Hopefully you got a sense of what the knowledge book is all about and what this mask technique is can help with. I mean, it's one method among others, and yeah, in some cases it can be very useful. In some other cases, it might not be so relevant. But again, if you want to know more about it, never hesitate to reach out, and we'll share more information with you. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Vincent. It was great.
Have a great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
I will
Bye-bye.
stay connected a few minutes if some of you have more questions. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.